audience. First off is Jane McConnell, who is, where is Jane? There's Jane. Would you say? Jane is the vice president in charge of programs here at the Rainier Club, and she beneficently oversees all of our activities to make sure we stay on the straight and narrow as much as we possibly can, which isn't very easy to do. And then we have Melody DeMar, who is chairman of the Arts Committee, who is co-sponsoring this event. And I'd also like to acknowledge my vice chair at the Literary Committee, Meredith Perlman, my incredible vice chair of the Literary Committee. And so obviously we are all gathered here for ACT's 50th anniversary, an incredible accomplishment. That in itself deserves a round of applause. And I've actually trimmed my remarks down to 20 minutes, so settle down. But anyway, seriously, ACT has won the best theater in Seattle 3 out of the last 5 years, which is something that needs to be acknowledged. In one man's opinion, it should have won it. ACT should have won it more than that, but I think they got tired of awarding the prize to ACT. And what we have now, what we will do, the format of this evening is we will have the program which will last from about 6:30 to 7:10, which will be an interview. We have the two distinguished gentlemen. We have Kurt Beattie, who is the artistic director of ACT. We have Carlo Scandiuzzi, who is the executive director of ACT. And we have the interviewer, whom we all know. We have Stephanie Hilbert, who will be doing the interview. Yeah. So just very, very briefly, I could talk for more than 20 minutes about these individuals, but I know you don't want to hear that. But Kurt is the artistic director, as I have said. He is retiring after the end of this year. Kurt, and if anyone qualifies as a living legend in theater in Seattle, it is Kurt. He's been involved in theater for 40 years. He has acted, he is a playwright, and he has directed. Kurt is going on comment as saying that when he first started at ACT in 2003, he wanted to do Jacques Brel. ACT is doing Jacques Brel, which is the lead-off co-production with Fifth Avenue, so I encourage you to see that. Then Kurt follows that up with directing Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which is a play of summary now. What can you say about the gentleman? His accomplishments, he's played King Lear, Ebenezer Scrooge in The Christmas Carol. The list goes on and on and on. And Carlo is by no means a lesser light. He joined ACT in 2007. He has acted himself in an area that I'm not really aware of. He actually brought pop groups to Seattle. Is that correct, Carlo? Punk groups. That's not an area I'm particularly strong in.
It's okay. I can listen to some music together.
Yeah, that could be a good Jeopardy category, but anyway. And then we have Stephanie, who actually interviewed Kurt when he joined ACT in 2003. Stephanie has interviewed various luminaries in Connecticut, in Seattle. She has also acted herself. So you're in for quite an evening. Settle back. After we have dinner, during dessert, we will have a question and answer. Dinner will start about 7:10, plus or minus whatever. So, anyway.
Thank you, Greg. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you all for being here this evening to help us celebrate ACT. And what I'm going to ask right now is all present, current, and past board members of ACT Theater, please stand so we can recognize you. Thank you. Including past. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for being here. The video that was on display was from a television program that Kurt and I did in 2003. So we haven't changed at all, right? Oh, no. So the other thing we could be talking about is the past of ACT, which we all know has been glorious over the past 50 years. We can talk about the present and the future. But what I'd like to start with is this incredible partnership between Kurt and Carlo that you may not be completely aware of. Kurt started as Associate Artistic Director in 2001, became Artistic Director in 2003. Carlo, you came to ACT in 2007, I believe. And so tell us about this, what has worked, what doesn't work. You can confide in the bosom of the family here.
I like the bosom.
What?
Let me just say, before we go any further, too, that you have to get Carlo in a corner and get him to talk about his experiences as a rock producer. I mean, they are really something. And that'll, then we'll just not talk about
we'll
that
do
anymore.
that in the Q&A.
So what would be the one thing that you will miss the most when you retire about Carlo?
Well, Carlo is essentially a deeply cultural person. He is a European who has become an American. He was trained in the theater in Europe. And so, in a way, his root sensibilities, the basic antiquity of the world, of Europe, is in his bones, and yet he's an extremely forward-looking person, a modernist, not a postmodernist, I don't think, a modernist, and so to find that combination, that sensibility, is really very rare. There are many extraordinarily gifted American artists, but often they don't have quite enough reach intellectually in the theater. I'm just going to talk about my form. And it's because they don't really know European culture. They don't know Asian culture either, really. So Carlo has got a very a broad sensibility. He also loves the avant-garde. I think that's a fair.
Yeah, yes. No, you're absolutely right.
No,
yeah, thank you.
Okay, so he's a risk taker. He's unafraid of the new experiment, while being able to appreciate Beethoven. So this is the ideal. I knew this from the very beginning. We were in avant-garde artworks and very strange plays when we were young.
Acted together, didn't you, at Empty Space?
At the Empty Space Theater, yes.
Yeah.
That was what
I mean, it goes back to '79.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carlo worked on one of my plays at the Empty Space, Oregon Gothic.
Yes.
And we got to know one another then.
Yes.
And then we acted in a play together.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened is that in 2007, I came up with a document at ACT Theater, a manifesto. And we invited certain folks in the community that we thought might be interested in this. And Carlo and Lele were two of those people. And Carlo saw what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And we had lunch here at the Rainier Club.
I know.
Yeah. And I discovered a great partner in Carlo.
Well,
And then
likewise.
Carlo became executive director in 2008. And one of the things I will quote, so I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but this is from Misha Berson, who said that Carlo's Swiss-Italian accent enhances his considerable charm. And that's from Misha. But I wanted to ask you, this charm has worked between the two of you, obviously, and you came on board for the then called Central Heating Lab, which is now the ACT Lab, and then you became executive director. What about Kurt will you miss the most when he retires?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Kurt is not going to retire. Kurt's never going to retire. And even though he's going to pass the baton at the end of 15, Kurt will remain with Act Theater, for foreseeable future in doing all sorts of wonderful things, like long-term projects like the AKA and Tales of the AKA and other things. So retirement is not the right word.
Right. He'll be busier than ever.
Busier than ever, absolutely. And what will I miss the most? I don't know if I will miss because I will be with him, but I will tell you a funny little story, and that has to do also with how actually women are so much more perceptive than guys. So here we were, at the Rainier Club, having lunch, and Kurt went on and on talking about, how he would love to have a partner, how he would love to have somebody that can really dive in, into the Central Healing Lab, into the things that he's been talking about in his manifesto. And I went like, oh God, Kurt, you're absolutely right. What you need is somebody like this, like that, and so on. And so we kept on going back and forth about, what the person would be, that would be a compliment. And then lately, after about 10 or 15 minutes, says, you guys are really knucklehead. You're looking at each other. So
That's true.
it's true, and I went, oh, but I can't do that. Of course I can't do that. I'm busy with other things. And then at night, we went back home, and I said, no, this is an opportunity that really presents itself once in a lifetime. So why not grab it? And I think that that's where, it's a continuation of many, many years, of friendship and just work-related, theater-related, what's the word? Simpatico, in what we were thinking, from the most popular of entertainment to the most bizarre and very, very dark. We had the whole gamut. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally for me, it was knowing that you were an artist yourself.
Yeah.
There wasn't the war between the artistic and the executive then that sometimes exists in the theater world.
It sometimes becomes a terrible problem in the theater. And I've never felt that Carlo was anything but a great partner and inspiration to me. Level-headed in ways that I am not. That's certainly true. And chastening occasionally in a very polite way. But always willing to see the glass half full, and always interested in the possibility and not the limitation.
Part of the manifesto, one of the things that really changed at ACT is we have 5 theaters, and they're constantly in use, but not just only by ACT Productions, but by nourishing other companies to grow. Did you consciously, the two of you, come up with this idea of the cultural of yes for welcoming theater?
Yes.
Well, tell us more.
Well, I would say this, that Carlo and I had I said, it's very interesting in a way. Maybe to me it's interesting, maybe to you it won't be. But I was trying to think about this place, the Eagles Auditorium. And I had worked for very fine artists my whole professional life. For Dan Sullivan, for Burke Walker, for Sharon Ott, for Gordon Davidson briefly for a while at Center Theater Grove in L.A. And really terrific people. Greg Falls. But I always felt that they were thinking about their institutions too narrowly. And it came to the surface. Here it was. I was somehow in charge of this place. And I had to try to find a way to think about it anew. So I started thinking about it metaphorically. And I started to think about the theater, that building. What was that building like in nature? It was like a reef to me. It was a vertical structure with a warren of rooms, and it ought to be semi-permeable. It ought to have a border that was could be crossed over by many life forms, mutually sustaining life forms. So how do you translate that into a functioning institution? I think that was the question. Because all theater companies, many of them anyway, not all, but many of them are built rather narrowly, and in fact ape a corporate structure. There's a CEO, then there's privileged subalterns underneath them, and then there's the workforce, you know, a pyramid. Okay. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to create an associative net, okay, where there were semi-autonomous structures within the organization that would inform each other organically, certainly with guidance, okay, an overview. But the idea being to enfranchise various research groups like you would in a scientific organization to go about solving a singular problem. And I thought this is the way we ought to try to make this place. We need to make it like a reef, or to think about it like a human being. A human being is the cerebral cortex, it's the heart, metaphorically, it's, you know, emotion, it's sensitivity, and it's the genitals, you know. And an integrated personality is all of those things, right? It's like when you experience a whole work of art, something that really gets to you, it seems to summarize in its uniqueness a universe of experience, a totality of experience. So the theater had to have a brain, it had to have a heart, and it had to have genitals. A zone where the unsayable gets said and the undoable gets done. Something that's deeply connective with everybody through the emotion, and something that's about thought, that's about ratiocination, that's about the intellect. And trying to get those things to work together, and yet not predetermine try to not predetermine what the outcome of the experiments would be, something that...
How do you determine this? Do you two have any conversation, dialogue, fights, arguments, or disagreements? Kurt comes to you and says, Carlo, we're going to do 50 Shades of Grey, I don't care. And, you know, how does this work?
No, he hasn't come and
hasn't
said
said
that to me. No.
Where
No, he
did I
came
hear
and
that?
said, what about 50 Shades of Red or Black? Gray. Well,
He picks the season artistically.
yeah, well, it's an organic experiment and process where I think that, yes, there is the ultimate decision making of what the season is with an arc and a story, you know, between all the different plays. But of course, that is just one part of it. The other parts are how we're going to sell it, how much it's cost. By the way, I want to say something, Kurt, something about him that is kind of a myth. And that is when we go to finance meetings, he says, oh, I can't come, I don't understand anything about finance. That is not true. Actually, this man knows a lot more than he pretends to know. And he knows, you know, that actually these two things are together. That, you know, you need to have a budget in order to make a play. And that those things are very important. Anyway, to go back to the decision making, so it is more of a type of an organic. So marketing is involved, Devo is involved. We talk about it, and then together, you know, we come together with a solution that is, this is the place that we're going to make. And from that point on, then of course, you know, we just fight and try to keep it the way we want it, which, you know, sometimes goes by the wayside and sometimes becomes very, very successful. So do we talk about taking risk? I don't know if we talk about necessarily saying let's do something and take a risk.
No.
But what we talk about is the opportunity to leave that permeable, you know, surface that you're talking about, to let it be infiltrated, you know, by things that we may not have thought about, but that are relevant. And I think that the idea of working with what we may call French theater, or smaller theater, is absolutely primordial to the life of our theater, because that's where it, the embryos, of what will become the success of tomorrow really kind of starts. So by inviting these people to play with us in the sandbox is very, very important. So there is an understanding. It's not that we sit down and says, okay, what kind of risky thing are we going to make? No, but it's an understanding that actually, by being open to the risk, it makes the whole work of the theater much, much better.
May I ask you both a question?
Yeah.
When we talked in 2003, and I don't have the exact quote, yes I do, I asked you about audiences, and you said that ACT audiences have more fun in cheeky pieces. They're more interested in intimate experiences than, say, the Rep or other audiences. Over the past few years, have the both of you seen a change in our audiences? I mean, there are 5 theaters now, so this is not just our main stage, but it's the other theaters that are coming into our building and using our space. Have you seen a change?
Well, yes, but I'll be quite frank with you. I think audiences have grown narrower in their ability to appreciate work. It's gone. I mean, this is a very hard question to answer. It's really only answerable with each individual project. And of course, the world being what it is and essentially somewhat chaotic and unpredictable, things have turned out in ways I couldn't have imagined, and wonderfully and unhappily. But I do think actually that, well, for instance, let me give you what I can give you as a historical perspective. It's biased, it's mine, it's narrow in the sense that it's ultimately subjective, like everybody's. But I would say that the range of plays that were produced at the Seattle Rep, at ACT, and at the Empty Space, and at Intiman, at the beginning of this wonderful explosion in the 60s and 70s, is quite breathtaking. If you look at those past list of plays and then you compare them with what is routinely produced in Seattle today, you can't help but be saddened by the comparison, because the range of work was much broader. It included European writers. It included very demanding plays intellectually. It included a range of work that wasn't immediately accessible to audiences. And more we find audiences are impatient with non-realistic work, for instance, with work that you kind of have to, wrap your head in a towel a little bit to get. Not that theater should always be like that, for God's sake, but in that respect, it's been a surprise to me. There's been many wonderful audience members, and I would say many experienced audience members, like some of you I know who are in this audience, who are very much more open than their counterparts at age 30. Yes, this is absolutely the case. We never have had so many intelligent, brilliant young people in this town as we have today. But they do not seem to me, and this is entirely anecdotal, not to be trusted as an observation, but just from somebody who's on the firing line, they seem to not be very cultural people, at least not in terms of the performing arts. I think maybe in other respects they entirely are. But it's surprising to me how conservative many of the young people are that I run into who have interest in the theater. How many of them are solely interested in going to the Fifth Avenue Theater, which is an august and fine institution.
Musicals.
But it's all musicals. I mean, gee whiz.
Then I'm going to ask I'm going to ask Kurt to weigh in on this. One of the things that we talked about in 2003, and I'll paraphrase you, is you said something to the extent of that lifestyles of technology is isolating people and young people, and the theater itself is alive, and it's an audience is an active participant in it. Do you see this impact with your experiences with film, the film industry, and technology? Do you see this change in audiences?
Yes, I think there is, but I don't think we should take it, for just a done deal. In a sense that what is very interesting is it's not about the people not liking the theater or liking what we do. Often is that they don't have the exposure or the cultivation for them to actually enjoy it. When I was talking to Colin Chapman about 5 or 6 years ago, who now is the president of our board, and he was saying to me, I have a lot of friends, that are in their mid-30s, and if I ask them to come to the theater, they say, oh God, no, I'd rather do something else. But if I bring them to the theater and say, just come with me, 80% of them actually are enthralled and happy and and thankful that they actually saw something that was relevant. So often is not because they don't care about, it's because they're not exposed to it. So what we did with Kurt, with the Central Heating Lab, which now is called the ACT Lab, is to provide an entry to a younger group of people. The ACT Labs is about around 35. The average age is 35. The subscribers is more like 60. So now we have people that are coming that are between, let's say, 24 and 40, that are coming to a venue that is exposing them to things that they find to be relevant. But they are enshrined into a theater that actually is doing Tennessee Williams and Sarah Rule and Ayad Ektar and all of these other writers. So by bringing them into the fold, into the sandbox again, we allow them to experience other things. And I think then that's the work that we're trying to do. It is about cultivation and providing, the quote-unquote entertainment, to a younger audience that is not necessarily saying, I don't like it, it's just that they don't have the experience of actually of the theater. I mean, what do you think, Kurt?
No, I agree with you. I would say, too, that when I said that about technology, I was a little more ignorant of what technology was then than I am now. I think it's in some respects it's isolating, definitely. I think that's proven, but it's also enlarging hugely in some respects. The fact that we can soon have access to every book written in held in every library at the touch of a key is one fantastic thing. And I think there will be great innovations that will be very meaningful to the theater in ways we don't know. So it's not about me being a Luddite at all. But right now, in this town, and I really am just talking about Seattle because I've lived here a lot. I haven't lived anywhere else other than Seattle in a long time. It's become a very hard-working town and a very kind of nose to the grindstone town, and really interested in the newest place to eat. And, I don't know, Seattle had no place to eat when I came, or very few places to eat in 1970, and in some ways the audiences were so much more vital so much more up for a new experience than they are now. It's so interesting. So I don't know what the outcome of all this will be.
When I moved here in 1992, Seattle was second to New York in terms of the number of live theater performances. And now, as you know, we've lost many theaters. I wanted to ask you a question. It's about the Greg Falls commentary that theaters are like grapes. They grow best in bunches. Is that still true today?
I would say yes, and I think we have to just to change the way we think about theater. We look at, about the way that Greg Falls was talking about theater, which I think at the time was a lot more original theaters. And
When ACT started, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And he justified it to Bagley Wright.
And it just makes sense, of course, because it's about collaboration, it's about being together, it's about working together, and working with the community. I think what's happened, what's happening now is that, of course, we've lost quite a few theater, the bathhouse, empty space, intimate, which is not lost, but in a different incarnation. We have a lot of amazing other theaters, like the Washington Theater Ensemble Theater, like New Century Theater, like Annex, like Strawberry, so like the Shakespeare. So I think that if we look at the ecosystem, that still works through.
Well, the only thing I would say about that, though, I would disagree with you about one thing, is that if you're going to achieve the highest possible thing in the art form, you have to have professionals. And by that I mean people who are able to make enough of a living to practice their art as a profession.
I agree. Yes.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of great work that is done by these small companies, but they can only do it fitfully, and they do it at part-time. So you have a really great company like New Century Theater, but they can only produce 2 works or 3 works a year, and they're small, generally, small works a year. And the reason they can't do that is that they all have other jobs. Now, what Seattle used to be able to do was to support, for instance, an actor between Tacoma Actors Guild, which is no longer with us, Intiman, the Rep, and ACT, and the Empty Space, and some of the other smaller companies that would pay actors professionally to work. They could make a living in Seattle.
Yeah, no,
and they really cannot quite do that now. You need the Rep, and you need ACT Theater, and you need the Fifth Avenue Theater in order to have places that will pay these people enough in the aggregate to have a real career.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things, too, when I first came here, there were actors that were certain actors. There was the Rep actors, there were ACT actors, and now there's so much cross-pollination because right now Carousel is playing at Fifth Avenue Theater, and they're going to be starring in your production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the 2 leads in that.
That's right.
And so all the actors seem to be cross-connecting a lot more between the Rep and ACT. One of the things I did ask you before you ever had the opportunity to direct in the Allen, this was years ago, I asked you which was your favorite theater to direct in at ACT. And at that time you said you couldn't answer because you hadn't yet directed in the Allen. Do you have a favorite place now?
The Allen Theater.
Okay. And what is your favorite place to see a play at ACT? Don't tell me the Lely.
No, there is. I have to share this with you. When I'm at ACT, there are these signs, that says Lely with an arrow, and I'm always thinking, oh wow, I just have to follow the arrow, and I found my wife. but no, I won't say that. I think I would say, and I would just kind of take a sideway answer, is that it really depends on what the show is. From a director's standpoint, I think that what Kurt is talking about is that the challenges and the marvelous opportunity that the theater in the round offers a director. From an audience standpoint, and it really depends on the show. But what I can say from an audience and also from a producer standpoint is that when I see things in the round, to me, it feels more expressionistic than in a proscenium. Because, first of all, the set has to be done in such a way that, there is no walls. So it's an illusion, an idea of a set. You couldn't do Vanya, for instance, with a house, in a round. But you can do a Sarah Rule Eurydice, with a swimming pool and that kind of a feeling. So that's what I would say about, the island versus, the falls. But
Yeah, I would also say that I think a wonderful insight in the structure of the way in the way they designed those theaters is that they really are kind of against spectacle. We do a lot of amazing technical things at ACT Theater. I remember the Pillow Man, where we had a concrete tower in the middle of the stage when people came in to see it. It was like, how are we going to see a play in this room? And it went away and came back and went away and came back through the whole course of the production. So it's amazing. But I think ultimately the theaters are about text and acting as opposed to the 19th century scenic theater, which is a proscenium stage, in which you can do wonderful illusory effects, but can be also distancing. So what that does is it forces productions at ACT to live entirely through the means of the play. And acting is at a very high premium. It always is. It's certainly at the Rep too. I wouldn't say that. But you can also create a kind of production at the Rep and at the Fifth Avenue Theater in which the actors play a part but aren't the most essential part, almost, of the event.
I believe we're supposed to be having dinner, but I will continue talking. We will talk until the food arrives. So one of the things I do want to make an announcement, too, to tell you that thank you again for being here. And because you're here, the ACT Theater is offering all of you and all the Rainier Club members a big 20% discount on all our productions this coming season, with the exception of Jacques Brel and Christmas Carol. And all you have to do is remember the word Rainier 15 for 2015, our 50th year. So when you call the theater or you sign up online, just say Rainier 15 and you will receive a 20% discount. Thank you, ACT. So let's talk about the future. This is going to be an incredible season coming up. This is the 50th. So what is your favorite play that is coming up this season, Kurt and Carlo? Then you tell us.
All of them. All of them.
all our children.
Yeah.
All the children.
No, I really don't have a favorite. Of course, I'm enjoying it. I've never directed Williams before, so this is great to be able to jump into Williams. And if you have any interest in Tennessee Williams, John Lahr just wrote a tremendous new biography of Tennessee Williams. It's a great read. And for the you theater hounds, it's an absolute must. Get it. It's super. Tell
us, you're going to be directing your wife in this production, Kevin.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I'm going to be directing her. Yes. John Aylward is going to be in it. He's going to play Big Daddy. And Brandon O'Neill and Laura Griffith are going to play Brick and Maggie. So I'm very, very excited to start that process. I also think I have a great partiality for Mr. Burns, which is the last play in the season. I think it's a must-see. Anne Washburn is really one of the great new playwriting talents in the country, and that play is very interesting. It's Mr. Burns. Some of you, many of you probably don't follow The Simpsons, but if you do, you'll get the reference. Yeah, really, I think it's going to be a great journey.
Carlo, what about you?
I just have to be sentimental, and although I like all the plays, you know, Threesome and Mr. Byrne, which I think is a fantastic piece, because I grew up, you know, with Jacques Brel, just to hear the songs again will be, to me, very personal and quite wonderful. He was an exceptional, you know, a man, an exceptional poet, really. And from what I understand and from what I've read so far, the translations are quite good. So I'm really looking forward to that. And so is Greg, I think. Although, Greg, I promise you there will be no dancing bears.
No dancing bears? One of the other plays we're going to have, and we have some members in the audience that are involved in this, is the new Stephen Dietz piece that's going to be
I should have mentioned that.
at our
Yes,
theater.
of course, Bloomsday.
Very exciting.
Bloomsday is wonderful. It's about two people, their young selves and their old selves, trying to understand each other in Dublin, in the background of Bloomsday, which is, of course, celebration of Joyce, James Joyce, and Ulysses. In Stephen's kind of ineffable way, he's woven these two events together in a kind of marvelous and ultimately very moving way. It's really wonderful to be able to produce this play, which we didn't know if we could do in this season, and we can. Some of the commissioners for the play are here
that's
tonight.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, this is
right there.
Yeah, which I was going to say that
wonderful.
This is the second time
Right.
that Stephen Dietz, you know, is gracing ourselves and the commissioners have, of his plays, and this one was kind of, how do you call that, you know, in the race when there's somebody that is in the back, a horse is in the back and that's just come in the front.
Yeah. Well, Stephen always starts in a very kind of messy place as an artist. You know, you look at it and you think, gosh, there's no real second act here, is there? But he's a rarity as artist. I've found, and I don't know if this is true, I would love to talk to somebody who edits fiction all the time. Usually most writers, most playwrights have probably two good drafts in them. And then after that, they sort of tread water. And you must hope that the second revision of a play is going to be the best one. But Stephen, like a lot of really great artists, can revise a play constantly and make it better all the time. So I've learned to trust him more than I did early in my career, when I would see early drafts of his plays and think, why the hell is anybody interested in producing him? And I found out why.
Well, Becky's New Car was the same thing.
Yeah, it was a
know,
notion.
You're right. I mean, the second act was just like, what? I mean, you read the first act and say, oh, yeah, and then it's like, what? And then yet, you know, he was able to, through many, you know, rewrites and workshops.
Stephen is like that character in that film. I think it's an Italian film. Boccaccio.
Boccaccio 70.
Boccaccio 70.
Fellini and
right. Isn't that the one where Mastroianni has, in order to make love to a girl, has to get out on a ledge?
Oh, yes.
Yes, you know, is that the one? You
Well,
know,
I don't know if that's the one, but that sounds like a beautiful image.
He has to endanger his life in order to succeed sexually.
That sounds perfect.
So I think Stephen Dietz is like that as a playwright. He has to endanger himself with the producing process in order to write his best work.
And he has hit it out of the ballpark because he's one of the most produced playwrights in the United States, if not the most produced.
Yeah, he truly is.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a day in a year where there isn't a Stephen Dietz play being performed somewhere, in the United States, which is quite a feat.
And he's made a great career for himself without a whole lot of interaction with film and TV. He has some, he's written some, but he is really a playwright.
It's going to be an amazing season. I see that things are arriving. So we'll take a break and be back over dessert. And everybody has an opportunity from every table to ask a question over dessert. So thank you so much for your attention, and bon appetit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And there is an altruistic ambition for the theater that ultimately, I think, must be the first thing that informs the work that you choose to do. I also think that most people that run theaters would agree with me in this, that as human beings, our tastes and needs change from minute to minute. Okay. And so a theater season probably ought to be something that is either defined by a point of view that has to do with education, or else it's like a fine meal. At some point in your life, what you need most is a wonderful cocktail and a canapé. And then there's a time in your life when you need to read the big Tolstoy novel and give your life fully to it, okay? And then there's a time when you need dessert, when you need to be taken from yourself by a delicious jeu d'occasion, okay? And so theater season, particularly for a subscriber, for somebody who comes back time after time and again, must be something that is various as that, I think. I do, though, think that ACT attempted something that no other theater in town has attempted with the Pinter Festival, which was to completely give a part of its programming to one important author. The symphony and the chamber music organizations routinely do this at times. They'll be deep diving into one aspect of the literature or one composer. But it's much harder to do in the theater, but really needed. So there's room, I think, definitely for that kind of programming. Certainly with a difficult author, as Pinter can sometimes be, you can really get what he's about if you get to see a number of his pieces and develop some kind of context for how he's thinking. When I remember the first time I heard 12-tone music, I was totally mystified by it. I didn't know what am I supposed to be listening to? Why is this piece the way it is? Actually, I've grown to be able to listen to some 12-tone music with great pleasure through frequent reacquaintance with an individual piece. And that's essentially education, isn't it? So that's how I think about making a season.
Yeah. Well, now I'm trying to make sure that what he says happens. And that's where I think our relationship, becomes so crucial and so wonderful. That is, okay, you want to do X, Y, Z. You want to do, a Pinter Festival. How can we use our resources to make that happen? And I think that a good producer thinks about how to empower the artist, how to empower the director, how to empower the artist to create and to fulfill the vision that they have. Really, it's almost as simple as that. And then there's 50 shades of...
Gray.
No,
Turquoise,
I'm not going to say gray, of
Turquoise.
yellow or green, to get to that point. So I think that our partnership, is successful in a sense, and I think that the culture has remained, with John following, that we are looking at how can we produce the best way possible the things that are essential, to the zeitgeist of the culture of the theater, with the financial help, that it needs in order to get there. So in a way, I think we're a good partner that way.
One of the interesting things, before another question, that some people may not realize is that Kurt, in a sense, has mentored his replacement. The new artistic director will be John Langs, and he directed you in Lear years ago, and then he's been working with us. And would you like to elaborate on that? Not many artistic directors get to pick their successor.
Yeah, I'll just say, and this is a shameless plug for the next guy at ACT, but I think he's going to usher in a great new era in the theater. I really do. I think he is astonishingly talented and has a tremendous heart and reach and an extraordinarily capable mind. And he's 43. He has connective tissue that is, melded with people in their 40s and late 30s that is really good, for the theater.
And he looks like Bradley Cooper.
I sit there sometimes looking at a play written by someone of his age, blinking, with utter confusion, and he can talk to me about it in such a way so that I actually know what the hell is going on. This is really important for the life of the theater in this town. Yeah. But he is a great lover, thank God, of classical work. One of the great sad problems of the theater right now in Seattle is that the classics are not being produced regularly, except by Seattle Shakespeare. And they only really they're monaural in the sense, I'm sorry if I'm being a little critical here, because they've done some wonderful things, but they mainly produce Shakespeare. And the world of Elizabeth and Jacobean theater is enormous, with many great plays, and they never do any of those. They don't do Johnson, they don't do Marlowe, they don't do Ford, The list goes on. And Webster, he has an appetite for the whole range of the canon. And while ACT is a contemporary theater and is going to principally be interested in contemporary work, I think there's a vacuum right now. There's no theater that's producing regularly great works of the past. And we need that. We need that reflecting mirror, or a catadupe, a reflecting stone, in order to see ourselves better. I really believe that. Yeah. And John has a lot of experience doing that kind of work. So I look for a great new era. I really do with the theater.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think that when you're talking about the classics and the relevance, of classics, a contemporary theater is not based on a historical time frame where everything has to be from 1940, to wherever we are now. A contemporary theater is about talking about issues that are worth discussing, that are contemporary to today, and that can be, a Greek play, the same way as it can be a Shakespeare or Ford or a very new play by Ayard Ektar. It's about the content and about the conversation that it brings that is contemporary. When we did Mary Stuart, it was really interesting because our first reaction, both Kurt and I, went like, Mary Stuart, why would we do that? I mean, we're a contemporary theater. And when Victor Pappas and Suzanne Bouchard and Allgood came and pitched it, we went, oh my God. And then they did a reading for us, and it was as contemporary as anything that we had done. And so that's the idea, of so classic. are truly as important, as any contemporary work, that we have.
Yeah, one of the problems, I think the Rep would be producing more of those plays too, if they could. One of the problems is that those plays normally have huge casts. You need many people, and even if you're doing a production in which actors are doing a lot of doubling and tripling in them, they're still very difficult to produce. So that's a problem that hasn't been solved yet.
We will.
We will. I have personally been wanting to do classical seasons at ACT as a kind of parallel season to the contemporary seasons. But we haven't found a way to really fund that, yet. I mean, it's just not quite within our realm. But maybe some of you can help us with that problem at some point.
Indeed.
No, I didn't say that. Don't even think about it.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yes.
Jim.
I was very interested and sympathetic to your views, Kurt, about the change in the theater scene between the Helicon days of empty space and where we are today, and how maybe the audience is more narrow. I remember Ronnie Bowana, Jungle Guide, with great affection. It was an extraordinary play. And what I saw you doing with the Central Heating Lab was an effort to recreate this sort of grassroots theater that bubbled up. And I think that's important. But the question I'm going to ask is sort of one about the competitive situation you find yourself in now. Because you tried to promote this bubbling up environment with New Century Theater and others, and yet now we have another venue that sort of is somewhat competitive to the porous venue you are trying to create at Kraushammer Place, and that is 12th Avenue Art, which has siphoned off Strawberry Theater and New Century Theater. How do you view that? And that's a question for you and for Carlo.
Well, it's just that there are just so many other wonderful artists now in town who are dying to get into the building. And I actually think that you got to remember that those organizations can only use that facility for a certain window of time. They share that facility. And they need other places to produce as well. And we have relationships with New Century Theater, certainly, and WET. So we continue to work on the projects and ideas. There's more interesting stuff wanting to happen on our stages than there is room for still today in Seattle.
Yeah.
So,
Jim, that's a really good question, and one could say, take the competitive aspect of it and say, oh, are we now dividing our audiences, so that actually, there's a finite number of people, and then we're going to kind of, spread them around, and therefore, I am more into the feeling that the more theater, the more exposure, the more people will actually be exposed to the art, that it will create more audiences versus, a finite number of people that will be shared among the different organizations. I mean, in the retail business, you say that all the time. If somebody opens a shoe store, all of a sudden, 10 years later, there's 5 shoe stores, in the city, because that's where people are going. And not to be crass and not to compare ourselves to a shoe store. But the point is, I think, is a lot of it, huh? What? Yeah, I like shoes. No, the point. I think the point being is that Imelda Marcos will just be very, very happy about that. The point is that I think that if we expand our horizon and get more people to be exposed, like we were talking about younger people earlier, to be exposed to the art form, I think that we're all going to be feeling winners in at the end of the equation. There truly is, I think, a sense of collaborations between the various theaters in this city, and I really can feel that. I think it's absolutely true. So there's a healthy competition. Let's put it this way: There need to be competition, but it's a healthy competition. Yeah.
Over here. Well,
Who wants to go first? Liz, and then Bill.
this, and then there's a question in the back.
I am struck by the conversation about the audience, and I'm thinking that this conversation is happening in so many of the art forms that we support, like the opera and the ballet, and their solution is somewhat similar to encourage all these other groups, like, for example, in the ballet, the Spectrum group and other dancers, and so I think that is a good way to bring in a bigger audience. But are you doing anything in the schools or anything to encourage younger people to explore the theater?
Well, that's a great question. Not enough. Not enough. That would be my first answer. My second answer is, yes, we do. We have the Young Playwright Project that really instill this into young student the breadth, what theater is about, by writing, being produced, by being on a professional stage and then being published. I think we need more of that. There is no question. And it's more than just having school buses coming to the school or to the theater, to watch a play. It needs to be part of the curriculum. It needs to be part of and I think that Intiman did a great job, when they did the American Classic, and then really worked with the schools, to have the schools come, and it was part of a curriculum, so that the kids would come not just to watch a play, and it was a distraction from their school, but it was really part of what they had to learn. And I think we need to do a lot more, than we are doing today. Yeah. Yes, Trevor.
They see you, they sit next to you, and they feel out of place. So welcome them. Just say, hey, thanks for coming, or glad you're here. If they seem a little lost and you know your way around, just be nice. Like, we all live in this town together, right?
Good point.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Trevor. That's
Exactly.
very wise for your young age.
Yeah, these young people have something to offer us.
I would say, though, too, in response to that question, that I'm very frustrated with this problem, because why should the burden of this education fall on these performing arts organizations? It should be the duty of our education system to be funded to the point where they can have this. It's all true and all over the world, and very successful educational systems have music and art and theater all in the fabric of public education from the time those people are little. And yet we seem to refuse to want to fund our public education system to the point where it can support these activities. Yeah. So, we need to create a lot of political pressure on the system in order to get our public education system responsible for some of that. I mean, it's scary, because a lot of the organizations in town, big and small, it's no secret, have been struggling to a greater or lesser extent. And then the state comes along and says, well, you know, I don't think, or foundations too, I don't think we can give you any money unless you spend a lot of it educating kids. Okay. Well, we need the money to produce the art, you know, first and foremost. Okay. And so now we have the added obligation of creating an education program, okay, that nobody can afford in order to do the work that the system should be doing. And it's a great thing to do. We should be doing it. But come on, let's have some real partnership with the scene, okay, here. And we do not.
Yeah, no. I think you're right. I think there are some programs. I was just thinking about the Seattle Arts Commission, you know, and their Creative Advantage, which is a program that is to fund teachers to teach art, you know, in elementary schools, and the city, to their great credit, you know, with the mayor, has funded, you know, a pilot program, you know, to the tune of several $100,000. That if it is successful, will put some more money. So I think that you're absolutely right. We have to look at, but it's a bit of a partnership in a way, so that we can do what we're doing, and then influence the rest of the community to make sure that they understand that this is not a frivolous. You know, it always struck me that in a school system, you know, if you're doing very well or whatever, you know, you get to do art as a privilege versus as a fundamental part of the education system. So we have to train ourselves that art is not frivolous. You said in your manifesto, art is as important as health and education. You know, it really resides at that level.
I've got the microphone, so I can talk, I guess.
Oh, no.
A quick comment on that. You know, I grew up in Connecticut, New York suburbs in late 60s, early 70s. And closer? Is it on? Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. And grew up in New York area, Connecticut, in the late 60s, early 70s. And going to theater was part of the curriculum. And we did it. We went to New York. We went to Stratford Theater, where we saw Shakespeare. Some crazy thing with Hamlet and tennis balls is all I remember about it. But, you know, it gets into your blood, and it's important. But the reason I have the mic is I had another comment and a question. First, you know, Kurt has gotten so many well-deserved lauds over this year, and we'll get more of them. But I think the other thing that he's done that is really remarkable and that needs to be recognized is bringing in John Langs, because bringing in a young buck who's smart and is going to take charge of this theater and do something is not easy to do. I know in the end of my career I couldn't have done it, and my hat's off to you, Kurt, for doing that. It's a gift to the city, and we thank you.
It is, and I'd like to just add one thing regarding Carlo. Thank you for bringing us Becky Whitmer, who's our new general manager at ACT Theater, and she's a great addition. So both of you are doing a wonderful job encouraging young ones to grow and flourish.
But I do have the mic to ask a question. So I wanted to know, Kurt, now that we're entering an era where we get a smaller portion of our ticket sales from subscribers, as I imagine most of the folks are here, and more one-off sales, how does that affect how you could craft a season? And whatever comments you have, I'd appreciate.
It's a really difficult question to answer. I think you just develop a real reservoir of existential fortitude. Does that sound like I'm dodging the question? Yes, because I don't know what the answer to it is. You know, artists have always lived outside of the Uber society. While some of them have been adulated and central to the societies in which they live, in the end, they have to face the indifference of the world. However it comes, and it's always been around. It's always been around. You know, as Wallace Stevens put it, the world is ugly and the people are sad. You know, so it isn't always ugly, fortunately, and people aren't always sad. But this drumbeat of pressure that comes to artists by knowing that their job is to not be in the middle of it, but to be outside of it, and to pressure it. I don't know if any of you remember that wonderful movie, at least it seemed so to me when I saw it years ago. Maybe it isn't so much anymore, when Dustin Hoffman played the comic Lenny Bruce.
Oh yeah.
And they're taking him off to jail for obscenity. And he says, don't put the guy who's talking to you about yourselves in jail. Don't do that. You need him or her. You need that person to say, wake up. I am not you. Who are you? You know? So it's always been hard, I guess is what my answer is. And it will become something else. One thing we can be sure is that time changes. It's us and the world as it goes on.
Yeah.
And you simply have to make the work, however you have to make it. Yeah. Some artists have become celebrities in their own cultures, and from the very beginning of time, and some have lived in ignominy and isolation, and done great things. Mm-hmm. So you know, it's a self-selecting process to be an artist. Somehow it is wearing a hair shirt one way or the other, and artists have to accept that. And you know, people come to me today in theater schools, and they say, "Well, how can I make a living?" I said, "Well, I'm sorry, you know, this is the adventure. You have to have it. You either have to take the robe on and go forward in life and do it, or not. You know, it takes an essential kind of courage. Okay, what am I supposed to provide you with? You know, a trust fund and a big soft bed, you know, to achieve something in the arts? I can't do that. That's not the way it's going to work. It doesn't work that way for anybody. Yeah.
You know, I'm going to take a more pragmatic answer to that. I think you're right, Kurt, you know, in what you say. But in my world, you know, of producing, what Bill is asking is that how can you continue to do, how can you choose, how can you do a season, you know, when the dynamics of economy, you know, change. And I think that that's what we're grappling with. I mean, you're on the board, and so is Trevor and a few other people here. We're grappling with this question that, you know, how can you continue to produce when the economics are changing and where you don't have the security of subscriber. When ACT was in Queen Anne, it had 12,000 subscribers. By the time it went to 7th and Union, and today we have almost 6,000. We shrink by half. However, our single ticket have gone up so that we're still actually a theater that has a budget that is larger than what it was when it was in economics. You know, have to take not the driver's seat, the passenger seat in the back seat. Art needs to be the forefront of what a theater is, of what an institution, you know, a cultural institution is. So you make your choices. And I think that what we need to find out, you know, in the new paradigm is how can we continue to produce in a different way than we used to, so that we actually can do those things, with do more for less, more art, with less. And I think that it's a really important thing, because otherwise, we'll do 6 one-person show.
Streetcar Named Desire and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and others made a real living in the commercial theater, okay, in work that wasn't devoted to spectacle. And compare that with today, when a serious playwright really can't hang around on Broadway for longer than a month or two. They have limited runs now for these plays, for most of them anyway. You're faced with the basic cultural problem that the work that you have to do cannot be about spectacle. It's got to be about something else. And the
about the art, about
the art. And so that's got to be your producing model.
That's right.
It absolutely has to be.
Yeah.
Now, I got nothing against spectacle. I'm like anybody else. I like to, we're all like crows to a certain extent. Loud noises and shiny objects. We just flap right over to them. But really, it's got to be about a whole lot more than that.
Yeah.
And
it's to find the right balance, and I think that the producing aspect, of regional theater, has to find its way in celebrating the craftsmanship of the people that actually are making the set, the props, the whatever, the lighting and so forth. But to really instill. I grew up with a hero of mine, which was Grotowski, who wrote this absolutely wonderful book called Toward a Poor Theater. And his basic philosophy was that, and not unlike Peter Brook, in some ways, give me a stage, the empty space, an empty space, a light, and an actor, and I give you a play. So to go back to the essential things that actually are not necessarily economically, expensive or prohibitive, is to go back to what Pinter was a very interesting thing. Here we went for 2 years doing readings, no set, nothing, just on the music stand. People got totally involved into the feeling and the discovery of what Pinter really was, no distractions. And then from that, we conceived the festival, that but the people were already imbued, with a feeling of just, elation, because of the work of Pinter. So you can do things with very little. It's okay. It's really okay. And I think that we have to find our way so that we can actually do things for less.
May I just share one thing? In a century ago, in the 60s, the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities was established, and at that time I was with the Connecticut Commission on the Arts. The first chairman was Roger Stevens, who came to us, and he told us there was a study done, and they discovered that by the year 2000, 2% of the population would be able to supply the need for the other 98%. And that 98% would have to be kept under constant sedation, which is why they established the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. And in the 70s, it was the golden age of ESEA money and tons and tons and tons of money for the arts. I personally was able to hire over 300 artists in Connecticut alone to work in the school systems. And there was a tremendous amount. And then in the mid-70s, bingo, it was over. The money dried up, and there was no more money for the arts and education. And we haven't recovered from that at all. And the values haven't changed much. The interesting thing about New York, and it's doing so well with Broadway, but I think they've just recently done a study, the majority of the audiences are tourists. And they're willing, they are supplying paying the $150, $200 tickets. It's not the residents. And what the regional theaters, like what we have people that are committed in their own way, either as past members, ACT past members, or as subscribers. but they are here, and in a way, the theater, ACT Theater, is part of the culture. And the interesting thing for me is to see the change from the day I was there when they opened. I was on the street watching the inauguration of the Kreisheimer place, and never dreamt that all those spaces would be so vital and alive and used. And that's because of the two of you, and thank you both for that so much.
We should probably
Question.
take one more. We should probably think.
We have one over there,
Where? Where?
right back at that table. I saw a hand.
Is there a hand, Greg, or do you have a question?
Yes.
This will be the last one.
I have a couple of questions, actually. One is about the realistic expectation that schools are again going to be teaching arts, and how much coordination could the arts organizations in Seattle help in leading new people into accessible plays for their particular level of experience. So, and people are coming in from all over the country to work at Amazon and Facebook and Google and other places that are here in the city. So it's not, you can't rely on the Seattle school system. So how is there a way for the Rep and ACT and Seattle Shakespeare and Book It and all the other theater organizations to work together to provide a continuum that allows an initiate to go into something that's easily accessible, to somebody that's more experienced to go into something that they can understand, instead of having, okay, here's what we have for our season, take it or leave it.
Wow, what a question! That's
Good luck with that one.
yeah. Well, there's many questions in your questions. In your question, the first one that I would answer is, when it comes to education and when it comes to how we can interact as theaters and symphonies and ballet and opera. Give the opportunity. We have a lot of wonderful actors, wonderful singers, wonderful dancers that are also pedagogues, that are great teachers. Allow these people to evangelize their art into the schools. In other words, give the opportunity, give the time to give these people an opportunity, to teach. That would be a wonderful thing, that actually we can partner, with the school system. The idea of barrier to entry, I think that, and I can't speak with anybody else for anybody else, but I think that we, to be kind of, not pretentious, but to, anyway, the point is that we have devised many different ways to reduce or to eliminate barrier to entry to the arts. And I think that often it is, a question of not knowing about it versus being there. The Tintex was a perfect example, of that. In other words, teenagers that can come and see a play for $5. There is Pay What You Can, that allows people to come and see something, for whatever, 50 cents or $50. It doesn't really matter. You can come and see something. So we're trying to make it so that the community has no barriers, to experience something that is very populist, at the same time as something that is very, not elitist, but intellectually challenging. So I think that we're trying, to do that. If we can all work together to allow the people that have the knowledge to share that knowledge with the younger people in our community, in our society, I think that we can be very, very successful. I mean, I don't know what do you think?
Yeah, you know, as usual, it's a problem of coordination. You know, having dedicated people devoted to making that happen. And so far, it seems that running our shops, our individual shops in this town, we're kind of siloed, and it seems like an awful lot of work just to keep your own shop running. But I think you're right. When we did this project, this mounting of this Hindu epic, the Ramayana, we had no idea what we could actually accomplish outside of our building. It seemed overwhelming at times, this attempt to do this, and we actually did bring it off, and it became about connecting communities in Seattle to that project in a way we had never anticipated. So no one's tried it, you know, but I think you know, there's something to that idea. Thank you for that idea. Yeah.
Say that again?
Are there organizations that could facilitate that or work that?
Yeah, are there cultural organizations, not specific theater groups or whatever, that can support that kind of thing?
Wow. Ooh. Embassies?
Embassies? You know, we tried that with the Chekhov project and did not succeed too well. They have limited funds. Yeah, I think it would be very helpful.
You know,
Becky could if you have any suggestions or anything, if they could email you, or
I think I've been pushing this idea for the last couple of years, and people look at me like I'm in a Charles Addams cartoon when I say this. You know, that horrified look of people in Charles Addams cartoons, if some of you know those cartoons. But why doesn't the whole arts community, that's arts patrons, supporters, board members, audiences, and the organizations themselves and the artists, all have a day that's a parade or a celebration in Seattle? And we all go down in force, and we would fill up. We could potentially fill up CenturyLink Field. And you get politicians down there to see that. And you say, whatever all of us are constituents of one thing, we're all believers in the arts. Whatever else we may think about the world, we're joined in that way. And if we were able to do that, we could actually become a connected community, okay, through a political agenda, which isn't about whether you're conservative or a liberal. It's about whether you believe in the arts or not. Okay. Yeah. You know, and if we could do that, then we could do what you're talking about. If we could just do that, you know. There are as many. Jim, actually, you did that survey. There are almost as many people going to sport events that there are people going to cultural events. It's really, actually, far fewer than are going to cultural events. It's an amazing statistic. And what you have done, you know, when you were running, you know, Arts Fund, and giving us the data that without any multipliers, $358 billion, you know, and $1 million, you know, were generated by arts and cultural institution. If you put a multiplier, you go to the millions. It's a force. Cultural institutions are a real force in our community, not ours, but in the United States. It's
okay.
Yeah.
I've been lobbied for one more question. I can't refuse it, so here
All
goes.
right.
One more.
One of the things that has struck me in this discussion so deeply is the cultivation of the interest in the arts. And I'm a retired educator. I understand cultivating passion and enthusiasm for whatever the content area might be. Mine happen to be world languages. But we ran up against some of the same kinds of curriculum challenges, lack of parent support, what is considered core to the curriculum. So I just went online because I'm listening to your interest about cultivating the arts in our youth. And if they don't care about going to the theater, doesn't matter how much you go out and give them a pixie dust on it and an occasional ticket, it isn't part of what they center on, and it isn't a national value. It's something that needs to be cultivated nationally, regionally, locally, and you've got, in the state of Washington, and this is not my area of expertise, but if you work from the shoulders up, which is always a good way to go when you are looking to advocate for something that really is important, and I think this is so important to not only local theater and the arts in general, but nationally, to seek a balance in who we are as a people. You've got K-12 arts standards. You've got an advocate and a director at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. This person and the people that are politically and curriculum-wise connected to the arts should be part of any consortium that you organize and should be right in there advocating with you and figuring out a way to connect to what is in the curriculum already and can then translate well to what students not only care about because they're learning about it in school, but they see it in the theater, they do it, and then they're accountable for it. And in a positive way, so that it creates passion and lifelong attachment to the arts. Whether or not their family is caring about it, they will become advocates that have been developed and cultivated through some sort of a contextual environment. And so I just wanted to point that out, that there are people to work with at the state level regarding curriculum that could be tapped into.
Amen.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Angela.
I think we will end on that. Like to thank Carlo, Kurt, Stephanie. Also like to thank Becky for being on board. And anyway, urge you, anyone here who isn't already, be involved with ACT's 50th season. It's going to be fun and exciting and a great year. Thank you all very much.
And one
Thank
more
you
thing,
so
too.
much.
Please, if you have any suggestions or interests, please email Carlo, please email Becky, and if you want to volunteer in any of these proposals Angela suggested, we really would love help. So thank you very much for your interest, and here's to the next 50 years of ACT. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
come see our gala.